All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Master of Business Management Taster online session. Thank you all for being here today, even though we had to shift really quickly into an online taster. Otherwise, we could be meeting in person today at the business school. Fortunately, the business school is not open past 5 p.m. today at alert level 2. So if you have not met me or spoke to me before, my name is Wen Gobal. I am the Business Development Manager for the Graduate School of Management. And if you have any queries about this program or would like to have a chat with me about your eligibility and program application process, let's have a chat after this session. Just a few housekeeping rules. This main presentation will be recorded and I will be sending the recording to everyone. And today we're only doing a case study on strategic management, but for the case study or the presentation, the taster for the digital branding and advertising, I will send you the recording link after this event. So after this, I'll pass on to our academic director, Margot Bowker, who will talk to you a little bit about the program. And Dr. Greg is going to walk through the strategic management presentation, which is a case study on New Zealand yogurt industry. And I'll pop that, that link onto our chat room and you can have a look at it. It's your handout. And we will wrap up with a Q&A at the end. And this session should end in an hour. So over to you, Margot.
Fantastic. Thanks, Wen. So I will just do my screen. Okay. Here we go. Okay, hopefully that's sharing all right. Looking good, Wen?
Looking good.
Looking good. Excellent. Okay, well, welcome everyone. We're really thrilled to have you here this evening to talk about the Master of Business Management. My name is Margot Bowker, as Wen has already mentioned. My role within this particular program is I am the program director. So I work within the Graduate School of Management in my role for the MBM. I'm also Deputy Head of Department Teaching and Learning for the Marketing Department. So I have a couple of different roles within the faculty, but really thrilled to have you here this evening. What I'm going to talk to you today is just a little bit about the program, which may prompt some questions. But like Wen said, what we'll do is at the end of today, please do feel free to kind of jot down any questions you might have. And then at the end of the session today, I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So kind of our key with this particular program is thinking about the business school and thinking about yourselves in terms of how you might, how we could potentially support you with maybe pivoting your career or potentially developing your career such that you can move up within management within whatever role that particular field is. I think one of the great things about the business school at the University of Auckland is a number one in a number of things. So things like employability, so getting a job at the end of your studies with us. We are number one in the world in terms of sustainable development impact, and also in terms of being considered New Zealand's most innovative university. So we do have things like accreditation and things like that. We have a world-class building in the Owen Glen building, which is where you will have your classes in there. So that's, as you, and Wen, in the back of Wen's background is a picture of the building. So it's really great facilities for you. In terms of the Master of Business Management, one of the key things is about developing your skills. So yes, both knowledge as well, and Greg's going to allude to a lot of that knowledge today in his mini case, but also developing skills in business management. So it's really thinking about enhancing your employability. What can you do to kind of further your career, or potentially, like I said, maybe you're looking to shift your career a little bit. I think another one of the key factors is it's for graduates from any particular field. So the idea is that most students probably don't have any business experience, not necessarily experience, but maybe never any business studies that they've done. So they haven't done a BCom, for example, or any business studies, and that's absolutely okay. This is designed for what we call non-cognates, so those without studies within business. There might be some that might have done a few papers here or there, perhaps some postgrad papers somewhere else, but really it is about starting you from from the ground up and building upon your skill set and your knowledge set. So a few slides later, I'll show you what I mean in terms of how we build on that when we have part 1, part 2, and part 3 of your studies with us in this program. I think another one of the kind of key selling points for this particular program is it's really, really focused on applied learning and being practitioner focused. So it's about building skills beyond just pure knowledge, but it's about applicability into your lives and your business lives as well. People that'll be on this program will be people that are likely to be working, in which case the thing that we will want to do in terms of your studies with us is really think about integrating our assessment into those applied skills. So thinking about, rather than just setting you, say, for example, a report to write, it'll be really balanced around where you're working at the present time. So really making it applied. Some of our papers might be a little bit more theoretically based in those kind of early parts, giving you that foundational knowledge. But as you move on to part 2 and part 3, it really will be about your application of knowledge. And this will be linked into how we run the classes as well. So you have a 3-hour class each week where you'll be coming into the business schools, into the Owen Glen building, and it will be about that application of knowledge, doing case studies, for example, working in groups. So it'll be a combination of things, and you'll do some of your studies prior to coming to class as well, working with case studies, watching videos, etc. At the moment, we have 2 key specializations in the Master of Business Management. So we have digital marketing and we have strategic management. So those are the 2 core focuses at the moment. So thinking about those 2 options that you have, this gives you different career opportunities as well. So thinking about being a digital marketing coordinator, thinking about an analyst, a digital analyst, or within the strategic management field, maybe a business analyst, business development manager, strategy analyst, etc. Again, maybe the type of job you might, or career you might go into, might also depend on the level of experience you have as well. So that might kind of determine where you might enter in a particular organization. So just in terms of a program overview, so this is what I was talking about in terms of part 1, part 2, and part 3. So part 1, which you can exit at different points within this particular program if you need to. So part 1 is our core. So this is where you do a range of management papers and also some marketing as well. So this is this kind of foundational knowledge. Once you've completed that, you can exit with a certificate in the MBM. However, you can obviously, hopefully, carry on to where you choose your specialization. So this is where you would enter in to either digital marketing or strategic management and take courses from each of those choices in the columns. The third part is the capstone and applied project. So whether you're doing digital marketing or strategic management, you would do global management and consultancy practice. So you kind of come back in together. And then you will go and do a consultancy project, either in a digital marketing company or within strategic management. I think a key point with that is you won't be required to find the businesses to do that. That is what the business school will be finding. But of course, you could have some input if there's something that really interests you, and that's something that we can look into. In terms of what the offering will be for the Master of Business Management this year, so I think some of the key points here is starting in quarter 2, we have 701 and 702 from the core. In quarter 3, 703 and 704, again from the core. And then by quarter 4, that core starts repeating. Okay, so you have the 701 and 702 again. And then you can start moving on to your part 2 specialization papers. The important thing I want to point out at this point is I think really recognize potentially your limitations around your time. A particular paper would expect 20 hours of your time per week. And we really, really recommend that students do take this on a part-time journey. So perhaps take 701, then maybe 703, then you could do 702, etc. Obviously, we can't actually restrict you from not going full time. So potentially going 701, 702, 703, 704. The problem is, because this program is, not problem, but where we're at for this year, as this program is new and launching, by the time you get to Q4, at that point, if you've done full-time up to that point, you would need to go to part-time. However, our recommendation really strongly is that you go part-time, or at least start part-time and see how managing your time can be, because it is quite demanding. It is postgraduate study for one. And also if you're working full-time, it's a lot on top of that to do within your week. As the years progress, the nature will be is that more courses will be on offer, and you'd be able to go back into a full-time offering as well. So a lot of this is dependent on enrollments and numbers as to whether that could shift or not. But just to give you an overview. The other thing I do want to point out, just to kind of keep in the back of your mind, is that we do have a South Auckland campus, so Te Papa Ako or Taitonga, and that is out in Manukau. And we are potentially going to be offering one paper per quarter out in South Auckland. And we will let you know once we have further details about that. But if that is something that interests you, please do let Wen know, because it would be really great to know if students would like to be out in South Auckland, perhaps if you work or live out there, because that's something that, yeah, we're really interested in. So in terms of getting started, so at the moment on the website, it will say applications close on the 1st of March. We are looking to extend this to the 15th of March. So we're just in the process of changing that at the moment. And the program commences in Q2 this year. So all the info is online. So just from me, thank you very much for coming along this evening. Again, after Greg has taken you through the exercise today, the little taster for today, I will be back online and available to answer any questions you might have. But again, after the session, if anything else comes up, please do feel free to get hold of me via email or phone, and I'll be happy to have another chat. So thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to Greg, and I'll let him introduce himself. But I think probably one of the key points I can make with regards to Greg is that he is the specialization lead for strategic management. So he will be leading that side of the program. Greg, over to you.
Okay, hello everyone. So my name is Greg, or Grigory Lyubovnikov, if you want to break your tongue. It's also a possibility. But yeah, just to refer to me with Greg, in this, world now that we're back on Zoom, it's quite odd, because all of a sudden I have to stare at a screen and then try to transmit what I wanted to transmit. So hopefully this is short-lived and we can talk on campus. With my particular session today, what I want to do is just give you a very, very brief peek into what it would like to study for the strategic management specialization in this program. It's quite difficult to do this in such a constrained time period. So, don't expect that you will be really learning something about strategic management today. But what I think you can expect is to understand a little bit what the approach would be that courses might take if you take this program. So I want to share my screen with you. Can everyone see this? Yes.
Yep, looking good.
Very good. The awkward Zoom silence when you don't know if something works or not. And you can see from people's expressions. Okay, so just a very short introductory background. Myself, I'm with the Department of Management and International Business, and my research area is within strategic management. So within that, I look in particular at competitive strategies, at corporate strategies such as mergers and acquisitions or alliances. And I guess because of that research focused, I've been approached to be the specialization lead for strategic management. I guess that's a kind of a natural fit there. And I just want to very quickly highlight what are the other types of courses that you may be able to take if you go down the strategic management specialization route. So we have strategic human resource management, for example, which focuses obviously more on the people side in an organization. You know, how can we recruit, retain more from strategic perspective people in our organization. Then we have strategic management, which is what I'm going to be talking about today a little bit, which basically tries to look at more of the long term of an organization. What should we be doing in the longer term in order for the organization to prosper? Then there's one course on business analytics, basically looking at how your business can be represented by various types of numbers and trying to understand these a little bit better and how they might influence or how they might help you to make better decisions about your in the role that you're in. And then there's innovation in practice, which is much more focused on trying to think about, okay, how can we come up with new types of ideas, with novel products, with novel processes, with all kind of new types of things that we could do in our organization. Okay, but now I will talk a little bit about strategic management. And within strategic management, for this short little talk, what I've chosen is to focus on competitive strategy. And I've obviously chosen because that interests me a lot, but also because I think it's nice to illustrate to you the things that you can potentially think about when you think about strategies. And within competitive strategy, we focus very specifically on trying to understand how do organizations behave against their competitors or in relation to their competitors. It doesn't always have to be against their competitors. And so as a short little background on, you know, the roots of competitive strategy, a lot of the thinking and early thinking of competitive strategy comes from military strategy. So, you know, in the I guess in the early days of competitive strategy, that is around the 1970s, 1960s, that time, a lot of it was based on looking at, okay, what are some of the strategies that military use, and trying to see, you know, whether that could be applied or how that could be applied, or if it's even applicable in more of a business context. Obviously, there's big differences between the business and the military, but some things or some learnings may still be relevant. So it's just important, I think, to understand a little bit these roots of where it comes from. So for example, this is why in competitive strategy, we look at what are the types of attacks that organizations engage in, or what are the types of defenses that they use. So if I talk about, you know, an attack, it may be I try to lower my price very aggressively. That in competitive strategy might be considered a competitive attack, because I'm trying to, for example, take market share by lowering my price and trying to convince consumers in this way to start purchasing my product. Okay, and obviously there's then new takes on this. I don't want to talk too much about that. But based on that, so early thinking has not really focused that much on these action response dynamics, but has more focused on trying to categorize what type of strategies are firms using. And we have these, what we call nowadays generic competitive strategies. And there's a professor at Harvard that came up with them that's called Michael Porter. I don't know if some of you might have heard of Michael Porter, maybe not. But yeah, if you have heard of something in business, then you probably have heard of Porter's 5 forces analysis. And that is, so 5 forces analysis is based in there. So what I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to just explain to you, how in a course like the strategic management specialization, we would look at some of these theoretical ideas and these concepts in order to understand these concepts first, and then trying to apply them to some form of a case study. So we'll get to the case study later on. But let's look at these generic competitive strategies. So there's one generic competitive strategy that is called cost leadership, differentiation, focus, and focus differentiation. And basically, this tries to say, okay, firms can try and compete, try and be successful by, for example, being the cost leader in a category, or they can try and be successful by differentiating, so by offering something in addition that not everyone else offers, or by trying to provide some extra form of service. And I think in order to illustrate this, everyone knows the supermarkets. Has anyone been to a supermarket lately? No? Everyone's going to a supermarket. Yes, everyone is familiar with the New Zealand supermarkets. Okay, very good. So basically, there's two enterprises, or two companies that that we have. Now, of course, we have different, within these, we have different supermarkets that we can go to. But if we look at Foodstuffs, which is one of the companies, and then there's Progressive. So Foodstuffs owns the supermarket Pack and Save, and they own the supermarket New World. Everyone's familiar with that? Yeah. So they're owned by the same company. And if I now wanted to apply this, my thinking around generic competitive strategies, then quite clearly Pack and Save is taking more of the cost leadership strategy. Now, we all know Stickman, and why do we have Stickman? Stickman, the ad figure that Pack and Save uses. What's their justification for having this? Anyone an idea? Well, we can't even pay an actor. You know, we're so concerned with cost savings that we can't even pay an actor to do our advertising for us, so we just have Stickman. Because they want to transmit, obviously, that they are the best, the lowest cost provider, and therefore you're going to pay you're going to have the best price. And obviously they try and price as low as possible. New World, which is obviously their other brand, is much more focused on differentiation. Now, you come into the supermarket, there's nice music playing, all of the vegetables, they're being sprayed, so they are nice and shiny. It has a nice flow. They guide you through it. Someone packs your bag. So a lot more a feeling of, well, if you go there, you get some value added. The prices are not as competitive, but people are fine to pay this. So this is just an illustration of what generic competitive strategies look like when they're applied by businesses. One is more cost leadership focused, one is more differentiation type focused. So I think that's just as an idea of some types of ideas and concepts that we may be covering, in a course like this. So obviously this is a research and informed ideas around cost leadership differentiation, and then we try and apply it and try and see how it works and understand it within the context of, for example, New Zealand, in this case, the retail industry, the food in particular retail industry. Now let's move on towards understanding a little bit about competitors. So I talked about competitors just very briefly. So Foodstuffs, it has one competitor that is called Progressive Enterprises. So then they own Countdown, for example, Coles and in Australia. And competitors are defined usually as firms that are operating in the same market, trying to offer similar products and trying to target some a similar customer group. Can anyone give me, and you will have to unmute yourselves to do that. Can anyone give me some ideas about who would you consider to be firms where you would say, well, this is a competitor of this, this one firm is a competitor of this other firm? Any ideas, anything? Worldwide, doesn't matter.
Maybe JB Hi-Fi and Neo Leeming?
JB Hi-Fi and Neo Leeming could be competitors, yes. Yes. Yes, in the retail.
It could even be the food industry, if that's so, like maybe the restaurants that are running around, or they can't be called competitors.
Well, yes, so different restaurant chains, so McDonald's and
maybe Starbucks, maybe McDonald's and KFC, or Starbucks and
McDonald's
coffee.
and Burger King.
McDonald's and Burger King, yes. Starbucks, and who might be a competitor of Starbucks?
Coffee Club.
Coffee Club, yes. Yes,
Or
so all of
maybe
these,
Baskin Robbins, ice cream stores like Baskin Robbins and Movenpick and the New Zealand Natural,
Natural.
all these ice
yes,
cream, they're
yes,
competitors.
yes, yes, very good. Yes, so all of these are competitors that we would say, well, you know, these are firms that are competing with each other. The curious thing about competitors is that we often don't really know who our competitors are. You know, even if you ask managers, they often have a very hard time actually identifying the competitors that they have. And this talks a little bit to ideas of competitive blind spots. For example, we don't always know who are actually our competitors. Obviously, there's obvious examples. Yes, so McDonald's and Burger King, yes, they are competitors. But once you, and there has been quite some interesting research looking at, you know, how do executives identify competitors that they have? And I think this graph here is quite interesting. No, if you look, around 100% of respondents could name a few competitors, but then they might be able to name 2 or 3, and then it drops very, very quickly, and almost, you know, none of them can name more than 9 competitors, even though they might actually have quite a few more than 9 competitors. And one reason for why this is tricky is because it's not always that clear whether someone is a competitor. It's not always that clear who is actually the competitor of an organization. But obviously that is quite important when we're trying to talk about competitive rivalries between organizations or competitive strategy. We should know, okay, who are these other organizations that we're dealing with? Okay, so in some cases it's very clear, but then when we move on to the case study, you'll see that it's not always that clear cut to say, you know, whether they are competitors. So for example, is Google and Amazon, are they competitors?
I think they're collaborators.
You think they're collaborators? Yes, so they do collaborate. Facebook and Google, are they competitors?
Not exactly, because they're targeting different market, because they are
But they're both
search
selling
engines.
advertising, no?
Aren't they all collecting data at the same time?
And they're all collecting data at the same time. So see, it's actually not that clear cut to say, well, no, they're not competitors, or yes, they are competitors. Because quite clearly, Google funds a lot of its operation by ad revenues, and so does Facebook. So they are competing for ad dollars. But obviously, from a consumer's perspective, I go to get different things from Facebook than I go to get from Google. No, Google, I want to find something that, you know, like I type in some keywords, I want to get some information. That's what I get. From Facebook, I want to connect with my friends. So from my perspective as a consumer, it might be different. That doesn't necessarily mean that from the company's perspective, they're not competing with each other. Okay, so when we talk about competitive rivalries and dynamics, and this is what we do kind of currently in the area of competitive strategy, we're trying to understand how are the activities or these actions and reactions that organizations engage in influencing the competitors, and whether they are prospering or whether they are not prospering. I gave the example of a pricing action before. For example, you know, if I lower my price, obviously that has implications for my competitors, so for the organizations that try and sell similar product to similar target group. Okay, so it's quite important to understand how these activities might influence organizations. And as I said, you know, I don't have time to go into a lot of detail about all of these things, but I just want to kind of run very quickly through one little case example that can illustrate why it's quite important to understand what are the types of activities that organizations engage in. So if we look at this graph that I've given you here, this is iPhone when it was first launched, and so this is kind of just like a little model that helps us to understand, and it just maps price versus primary benefits in terms of advanced functionality, and it maps this at the very time that the iPhone was first introduced. And you can see, here the iPhone was introduced, and it was kind of ultra premium, very expensive, but also a lot of functionality. And you know what the initial reaction was of competitors? So who might be a competitor of an iPhone? A company.
Samsung Galaxy.
Samsung, yeah.
At that time, Nokia, Motorola. Okay. But if you look at, for example, when Apple first launched its product, its iPhone product, the reaction of the Nokia CEO was like, "Oh no, don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen." Because why? Because they're in this ultra premium segment. They're not even our competitor. We're not ultra premium. We provide like phones to people at a reasonable price. These guys are just crazy with their pricing. But there were two actions. So one was the entry. And then after the entry, after building some initial momentum, it was quite easy for Apple to actually just drop their price. And all of a sudden, whoop, they were not ultra premium anymore, but they were straight in there competing. And actually doing it quite a bit better with the more advanced functionality that they were offering. So this is why it's quite important for firms to understand what are the types of activities that their competitors engage in. And this basically just highlights the progression in a different manner of what we all know now. Obviously now the whole market has switched towards that more advanced functionality. Now we all have the smartphones with or basically small computers in our pockets. So it's really shifted towards that. So this is why it's quite important to understand the activities that competitors engage in. Okay, so this is going to be my last slide on the theoretical side of it. So in order to understand these types of activities, we have, for example, a model of competitive rivalry. I'm not going to go in detail about this. You can study it if you want to, but basically it tries and outline what are the different stages and how do these stages progress that help us in understanding the types of activities that organizations might engage in when they're trying to compete with each other. So first there's some ideas around we can analyze them in terms of market commonality and resource similarity. I've talked to that a little bit. Now, similar markets, so whether they are talking to a similar market, whether they are doing it with similar products, so the resource similarity, then we can talk about what are the drivers of the behavior. Are they aware of each other? Are they capable of actually responding? Just because I'm lowering my price doesn't mean that you can lower your price as well. And what is the likelihood that you're going to lower your price? What is the likelihood that you're going to react to such a price movement? But it's not restricted to price movements. It could be an advertising campaign, having George Clooney sip your coffee, for example. There's many different ways in which firms can engage in these types of competitive activities. So this is just one model, for example, that we could look at. So we already actually talked about quite a few theoretical ideas around competitive strategy. We talked about generic competitive strategy. We talked about identifying competitors and who are competitors. And now we talked about the activities and how we could analyze the interactions between those competitors. So what I want to do now, I'm going to put you all into little breakout room groups so that you get a feeling for what, for how this program will be working on so we might have some ideas as I presented now. They might come from some of the readings you did. They might come from a pre-recorded lecture, or they might come up from an in-person lecture. And then when we meet some time of the time we meet in our building and when we have our lecture, we might be using some of that time to actually try and apply that knowledge to analyze a case like the one that Wen has shared with you. So has everyone got access to that case? There is a link in the chat.
Yes, I just shared that in the chat room. If you could just click on it, that would be the sheet that you'll be working on. And I don't have the questions in there, so you might need to take a screenshot of the question.
Maybe, well, either just jot them down and take a screenshot.
Yeah, jot them down.
They're not that difficult. So, so in that little case, you will see a little, just an overview basically of the New Zealand yogurt industry. And you will see, you know, there's different players. You can kind of see the market shares, how much they sell and all this. And based on that information, and obviously any type of information that you personally might have about the yogurt industry from going to a supermarket or eating yogurt yourself, I want you to talk about these 4 different questions. You know, so who are the competitors? Are there competitors that you can identify within these firms that are in this industry? You know, can you make any inferences based on your understanding about some generic strategies they may be using or may not be using? Do you know anything about dynamics? Are there any dynamics that you have observed in any type of way? So that's obviously not necessarily just in the case or in the information that I've provided. Or are there competitive rivalries or not? So now what I need to do is I need to get you.
So do you want me to just create 8 breakout rooms, about 4 to 5 people?
Yes, I can. If you haven't done this yet, then I can actually probably do
I can make you host.
Okay, or you can do it as you.
You have the power now.
Okay, so I'm going to create 8 rooms, and you're going to be assigned automatically. And you have been assigned. And so once I'm opening, you'll get a prompt on your screen asking you to click on it, and then you can join a breakout room. And then maybe just with the people in the room, have a quick discussion about this. Not very long, 10 minutes or so, and then we'll get you back into the main session. Oh, what did you think, Isaac?
It was interesting. Yeah, unfortunately, our team didn't have a lot of interaction. Some were driving and some were unable to speak whilst at work. So
yeah. that is from my experience the biggest drawback of these online sessions is that the breakout rooms don't work.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's even though they're very valuable in the physical world, in the online world, they just don't seem to work.
My experience is they work, but if you only have a sort of maximum of 4 groups, everyone has great connectivity. And you've got
lots of time, and you can be in every room to discuss with everyone. But if that's not the case, then in a physical environment, everyone still does the discussion. In an online environment, it doesn't happen. Okay, I think everyone should be back now. So any responses? What did you guys discuss? What did you guys think? Anyone wanna volunteer?
We talked about Raglan, and one of the persons, she said that Raglan, they're basically the non-dairy ones, and not sure if they're the market leaders or if they have any competitor in that field. But what we were basically discussing was that maybe Fonterra, which is like giving, what's the brand? I think Anchor, and Meadowfresh, they might be competitors in the same market. And the only thing that we talk about was Raglan being the only non-dairy yogurt that's available. Though we did not know about the others. If there are others that are offering like non-dairy ones, we had no idea. But we talked about Raglan being the one that is mostly sold and being used by vegans. So we are not sure if it has any other competitor in the market, but Meadowfresh and Anchor, they definitely are competing with each other.
Yeah. Okay.
So
yes. So actually, if you look at the list of top 10 producers, you will see Cathedral Cove Natural. They're also dairy-free yogurt that does coconut-based yogurt. So yes, obviously they do have competitors. I mean, but I think, you know, you're highlighting a lot of interesting discussion points, no? So are these non-dairy yogurts, are they competitors? Or are they not competitors? Are these the players
Dairy
that Fonterra should be watching out for? Or are they, you know,
not really, because I am not. I think they should not be considered as a competitor. Anchor and Meadowfresh, like, because they serve the same thing and same purpose, they might be considered competitors for that reason. But maybe the non-dairy is, I wouldn't say it is a very small part of the market. It's growing up, obviously. We're getting more people converting to vegans, so it is growing. But maybe it is not so worrisome for them for now. That is what I think, though. I've got no ideas.
No, I think they're definitely a competitor when you consider where they are on that chart, and not just for vegan, but also for taste preference and all the health benefits. Once you get away from, you don't necessarily have to be vegan to not want to have dairy.
Ah, yes, I think that's these are. So I think all of these are really interesting points. You know, so. And that is obviously the point of this exercise, to get you to think about, well, how do we define who the competitor is? And obviously, most importantly, would Fonterra consider Raglan to be a competitor? And do they react to whatever they're doing? And we can't really see dynamics because we don't have the information here. But if we look at the pure, you know, at the moving average totals of the value changes, Fonterra brand is shrinking 5%, and while Raglan is growing 60%. So there are some dynamics going on there. We don't necessarily know what is driving it. You know, is it price? We don't have that. It doesn't look like it's price because the volumes don't also grow by the same extent. But so I think these are really interesting discussions to have. And Chiari,
Yes.
I think I agree with Chiari. It would be probably quite foolish of Fonterra to just say, well, they're so different. They have a different product. It's non-dairy based. You know, this is, and so it's only vegans who are going to eat them, because I don't think in the last 12 months, all of a sudden, 60% of the population realized that they're vegans. Or, I mean, that, you know, if only vegans would eat them, then obviously all of a sudden we have 60% more vegans. They're growing at 60%. So,
and Raglan's about to go international as well, so clearly they're doing something right.
Yeah, so I think these are, but these are interesting things. I think Sarah also touched on, you know, the potentially different types of generic strategies, you know, possibly Fresh and Fruity being in competition with Meadowfresh, you know, kind of more on the low cost positioning. Whereas, and I was in a group with Sam, with Sam, and we discussed, you know, De Winkel and Naturalia, where that might be more of the premium positioning. So anyway, I don't, you know, we're not going to solve this case. I just felt like this is a nice illustration of, you know, how we can use some of these theoretical ideas we discussed in order to understand better an industry with quite little information, obviously, now about the industry, and trying to make some inferences about who are competitors, what are the types of strategies that they seem to be using, what is working at the moment, what's not working, you know, are there dynamics happening, are there not dynamics happening? And I think that's actually it for me.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Greg. That was really great. And I found myself having to kind of hold my tongue, knowing that this was a strategic management focus, and really thinking about how this integrates with marketing strategy as well, because obviously there's a huge amount of overlap in talking about competitors, and therefore the marketing tactics and strategies that you would take in terms of how to manage these competitors in a competitor analysis. So Really, really interesting. Thank you very much, Greg. So really just at this point, we can go beyond 6, so don't worry if you do have lots of questions, but really it's just opening the floor to you all if you have any questions that you want to ask about the program, about different courses, about really kind of anything in particular. Wen is of course still here and she can answer perhaps maybe more questions around enrollment and other things, but basically myself, Wen and Greg will just jump in if you have any questions.
Yep, and I've also shared my email in the chat, and if you'd like to book a appointment to have a call or meet face-to-face at the business school, hopefully we're back at level 1 next week, use the Calendly link to book a time with me. Great, the floor is open. Feel free to unmute yourself.
You can also, if there's people asking questions, you can also post a question in the chat as well, because we'll look at that.
So I've got a question around, so I'm in the field of strategic transformation, where we think about, how do we transform organizations based on, strategies and so forth. So what is the link from this study course or this program from a strategic management perspective to more the actual, the actual transformation and the operational side of it from a strategic transformation perspective?
Greg, maybe one for you in terms of strategy.
Yeah. So, what I think, if I understand you correctly, is you're talking about how, will we be talking about implementation of strategies, for example? So within, obviously, the strategic management course, the one that I lead or the specialization and the course that I teach, yes, there will be something around implementation as well, thinking about models of implementation. But obviously the course is structured to give a broad overview for anyone who has got no background in strategic management. So it does also cover all of the other bases of, what are strategies, what type of strategies. Obviously today I focus very narrowly just on competitive strategies, competitor analysis. That's not, that's only a tiny bit of what strategic management is about. It is, the transformations take many different levels. So, change management around people, for example, this may be something that is covered in the strategic HRM course. Here in the strategic management course, it's more, okay, if you think about we need to have some form of strategic pivot, this might be the strategy we want to pursue. And then, yes, we're going to talk about a few ideas around implementation as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just answer a couple of questions that have popped up in the chat. So I'll go to Amit's question. So you said the certificate part, can that include courses from the core or the specialization? So if you're just doing the certificate, it usually starts from the core. However, you can do a certificate with a specialization. So that means that you would choose, if you were doing strategic management and a certificate with a specialization, you would choose from 701 to 708. If you were doing a certificate with a specialization in digital marketing, you would do 702 and then choose 3 others from the digital marketing part 2. But typically, in terms of if you're doing the full MBM, you'll start with the core, then move on to part 2 into your specialization, and then into part 3. So great question. Hopefully that's answered. Pop in another one if that's not quite there. Tom asked a question how the course is structured. So I probably kind of semi-answered that in a way. So typically you've got these 3 parts. So you'll do part 1, so 701 to 704. Then you'll move into your specialization of choice, in which case, and again, if you maybe choose something from the get-go, it doesn't mean you couldn't change. You would be able to change it before starting your specialization. So you do part 701 to 704, then you go into your specialization. So 705 to 708 if you're doing strategic management, and 720 to 723 if you were doing digital marketing. And then you go into part 3 where you do 709, 710, and then your project, which is 750 or 751. So that's the full structure in terms of doing the full 180-point MBM. So there are a lot of, as I've kind of mentioned with the certificate, there are kind of little different options that you can have if you want to do kind of a shorter amount. So that's kind of the gist of it. It's not necessarily explaining all, because there are people who might do the diploma that enter at 120 point, who've already done postgrad courses that are equivalent to the core. So potentially who've done maybe University of Auckland business diploma courses, potentially could enter into part 2 and do a 120 point. So just a little bit of information there. Just while I was chatting, when did any questions pop up that I've missed out? Studying part-time.
There's quite a lot of questions. I'll try to answer those that I can.
Okay, so can we just do part 1 core course and exit with a postgraduate certificate and a master? Yes, you can. So you can do part 1 and enter with a certificate. Do I need to complete 4 courses in part 1 to be able to do courses in part 2? So depending on the courses that are on offer, potentially, particularly if you're doing strategic management, then you could pick things in different order. That would be fine. For digital marketing specialization, 702 is a requirement for most of the digital marketers. You have to have done the marketing paper first. So that might hold up potentially the order in which you do it, but there is some flexibility. Obviously, if you're just doing the certificate, then there's certain courses that you would do. Now, a question from Jesse: studying part-time means taking 1 class per quarter, full-time 2 classes per quarter. That's correct. And definitely what we're encouraging is starting with 1 course per quarter. The expectation is a course equals essentially 20 hours of work per week. So if you are working, you know, a 40-hour job, that's doing 2 courses per quarter is a lot. On top of that, that's another 40 hours. So you really need to factor in, you know, your life, and, you know, making, you know, doing that for non-stop would be pretty tricky. And noting also that at the moment, by quarter 4, we are currently only offering in the part 2 1 paper per course. But again, this is dependent on enrollment numbers. But a great question. Have I missed anything else? So Jesse, yes, but Wen's answered a bunch, so that's awesome. 4 postgraduate certificates. So this is Ruthie. Can it be part-time study? So if you did a postgrad certificate, 4 courses, part-time study, you can complete it within a year. So 1 paper per quarter. Yep. So potentially, if you were just looking at doing the certificate, maybe just the core, then you could do that full-time and be this year and every year, well, from then on, because those are the papers that we're currently offering 2 per quarter. So you potentially could do that full-time and be done in 2 quarters. So that is a possibility, but we are definitely recommending starting part-time. You can always shift to full-time if the courses are available and you think you'll be able to handle the workload. Classes are taught Wednesday. Oh, thank you, Wen. Some great questions. Can we change the specialization after finishing? Yes, you definitely can. So you can change. So if maybe you started with digital marketing and you got to the end of the core and thought, no, actually, I want to do strategic management, that's not a problem. We would make a change. If you're doing a 15-point, it means Wen's. So basically, in terms of the papers, yeah, Wen's made a really good point. We offer the courses. So 701 and 702 are on in quarter 2. 701 is on a Wednesday night and 702 is on a Thursday night. So they're on different nights of the week. Yes, so we answered so many great questions. This is awesome. Is there anything else?
I think we covered most.
I think we covered most. Is there a diploma as well? So yes, there is. So that was the one I mentioned a little bit earlier. So there is a 120-point diploma. Now, and that's kind of in 2 potential ways. So if you start with the core and you decide that's all I kind of want, I'm happy finishing at that point, you can exit with a certificate. If you then move on to the specialization, either digital or strategic, You get to the end of that and go, I'm kind of happy with that. Maybe my circumstances have changed, whatever the reason, you might exit at that point, and then you can exit with a diploma. So that would be a diploma exiting at that point. So yes, you've got different kind of exit at each of the parts. You've got exit points, certificate, diploma, and then obviously if you complete the final part, you would exit with the masters. I think the key thing is with that grade point average entry, it is also that you need to maintain that throughout. So it is important to get to that final stage. You need to still have at least a 4-point grade point average to be able to move on to part 3, for example. So good questions. Sorry, there's been a lot of questions. Please feel free to unmute if you want, if there's something I've maybe missed. If there's anything you felt like I had.
There's been one question about accounting specialization in Manuka campus. So
I don't know about that with respect, it doesn't apply to this particular program. So if there is a postgrad what was it? Accounting degree. So you could, you might be able to do an accounting degree out at Manukau, but it doesn't link to this. At the moment, we currently only have 2 specializations. That may change in the future with potential other specializations we might do, but at the moment, there is an accounting or financial decision-making paper linked to accounting that you do as part of this program, but it isn't linked to the marketing courses out at Manukau.
I have a question, just in terms of the 20 hours that you flagged per week per paper, what is that actually made up of? Is it reading, assignments, preparing for tests? Can you just give a little bit more context on the workload?
Yeah, really great question. So each week you have 3 hours of contact time. So that's your Wednesday or Thursday night. So that's that kind of 3 hours. The remaining 17, and maybe in some weeks it won't be the full 17, and other weeks might be a little bit more. It will relate to any pre-work that's required. So before you come to class, because we might be looking at case studies, depending on what the staff member taking the course is going to be getting you to do in class. So it will likely be some readings, whether it be case studies, journal articles, applied business articles that you'll be getting to do. There might be potentially videos or links to the videos that we're wanting you to watch to upskill in the particularly in the core courses, that foundational knowledge. So if you've never, for example, taken a marketing paper, you'll be getting that kind of foundational marketing knowledge. So there'll be a lot of that. I say a lot, there'll be a large component of work you'll be expected to do before you come to class. So yeah, readings, case studies or readings, recordings. There might be some content recordings that you will watch. The other thing that will link to your assessment. So assessment within the course will be within the 10 weeks. One of the reasons for this is that typically in the quarter system, you have 10 weeks of classes, then there's kind of a pause for a week, and then you sit your exam, kind of what would be week 11. Knowing that, then then there's like a week, and then you'd be starting again on the next quarter. In this particular program, we'll be doing all the assessment within 10 weeks, such that you will get a pause between taking the next quarter. So you've got a little bit of downtime before you're at it again. So some and probably a reasonable amount of that, say 17 hours that is there, will be working on the assessments that you have. Now that could be a case analysis, that could be preparing for a test, that could be preparing for a final week test as well, so a mid or a final week test. Could be preparing a presentation. It could be whatever the assessment is around your particular course. So that's essentially kind of how that 20 hours gets made up.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes, someone has a question about completing core before you can go to stage 2. And I was just saying it's depending on your GPA when you apply.
Absolutely. So say if you were going to go into the Master of Business Management, if your GPA and you were going to specialize in, say, strategic management, then obviously you have a bit more flexibility in terms of the order in which you could do courses. However, that is dependent on your GPA. So if your GPA meets the level, because sometimes we do allow people in with a slightly lower GPA, in which case you will be required to complete the core at the GPA required before you could move on to a specialization. But I think noting that for the digital marketing specialization, you need to have done the marketing course before you can do most of the digital marketing papers. You can do 720 concurrently, I believe. That in that sense, potentially that could kind of shift the order in which you do it. And it also will depend on, and this is what Wen and her team and Anya and Alana, who unfortunately aren't here tonight, but we have a great team and behind this program, and they will help you work out your particular schedule to work through. So whether you're going to go kind of part-time, what's the best way to structure the order so that you don't suddenly get to a quarter and go, oh gosh, I've done all the papers that are available in that particular quarter. So it's really, my best advice would be to do the core before just jumping ahead to the specializations in part 2, because it will really give you that foundational knowledge. And I think that's particularly important if you're coming from a non-business background. I know there are people who will have business experience and that maybe do want to do it in a different order. But my recommendation definitely would be to go with the core first, feel comfortable with that, and then move on to your specialization. Great question.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
One question about lectures being recorded.
Okay, so this is a really interesting one. So, I mean, maybe Greg can jump on this, having taught on.
Yeah, I guess as a standard, the University of Auckland records lectures. So I teach a different program, but it's kind of slightly similar. So how it works there is that we do record the lectures, and obviously students can then access them. But often there's not really much worth in recording the more work components, the more team-based working components. So then we don't record that. And in your, let's say in your 3-hour block, we might have an hour's worth of lecture time, and then 2 hours worth of more application-based time. It can have many different facets to it. Then that hour's worth of lecturing time would be recorded and made available through Canvas, which is our learning management system, and the other 2 hours would not be recorded then.
Yeah, and I think given that this is the focus of this particular program is about it being applied and practitioner focus, Greg is spot on that a lot of these 3-hour classes will be kind of more workshop based, getting you to apply your knowledge and discussion and things like that, which doesn't record particularly well. Our general expectation would be that students would be in class every single week. Obviously, if there's assessment in class, if there's a test or end of quarter test, then obviously you would need to be there. It is really about being engaged with that content. So, you know, obviously, if you have a really good reason not to be there, we're not going to be, you know, doing participation marks or taking record, but it would be an expectation that at postgrad level, you would be in class and really engaging with the content to get the most out of it. Yes, all classes face-to-face. Spot on, Wen. Yep, face-to-face. So there will be content, you know, foundational knowledge that we will provide potentially as recordings, maybe prior to coming to class, or might be something we might ask you to watch perhaps after class. So there will be elements of that, of digital delivery, but we really, that's in that sense, that's why we're really wanting students to be there in those weekly evening classes.
And on the recording, I guess students often use recordings for revision purposes as well. So I think it's very valuable to have them, to have the recordings, but it doesn't substitute for the presence.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Yes, I have one. Sam here. Are there any sort of tutorials or anything like that outside of the regular 3-hour lecture? Like I heard some other courses have got things like on Saturday, for example, that sort of thing.
No, you will only have your classes in the evening. So just that 3-hour contact, so either on a Wednesday or a Thursday evening. So there won't be any expectation, given that we recognize that you're almost everyone will be a working professional, potentially with lives in the weekend. So there won't be an expectation that we do any block teaching in the weekend either. So just the evening.
But of those 3 hours, there might be a component that is more structured like a tutorial.
Yes. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have also shared the video from Dr. Michael Lee in the chat room, because I noticed I actually didn't have a lot of your, because some of the names look a bit not on my list from the Eventbrite registration. So just in case you did not hear from me tomorrow, that's why I do not have your emails.
Or nab her email address again.
Yes, or flick me an email if you would like to have a recording and just want to make sure that you're in the list. I know a lot of people have left the Zoom room, but yeah, so just in case. And if you're not sure what your GPA is, especially if you did not study in New Zealand, if you study overseas, what we will calculate is a GPE, a grade point equivalent. So send over your full transcript that also has the grading sheet from the respective country that you graduated from. And what I will do is I will send it through to admissions to assess your GPA, and then I can advise you on your pathway.
Thanks, Wen.
All right, if there's no other questions, I think we can wrap up. Otherwise, you have my email, Margot's email. If you have more questions, we have a Connect information session on Monday at 5:45 on Zoom as well, where I'll be covering headline details about MBM. You got a lot more out of Margot and Greg today than what I will be covering on Monday. Thank you all for your time, and have a good evening and stay safe. I'll be the last one out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.